Welcome back to Miss Burkhart's math class. Make sure, as usual, you have your notes in front of you as to fill in as you watch the video, and make sure you are pausing the video to complete your notes before continuing on. And as always, make sure you are replaying any parts that you need to make sure you fully understand the information. So today we're going to continue talking about Standard 6.6a, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing integers. Specifically in today's lesson, you're going to learn how to multiply integers using both counters and a number line. And you're also going to determine the rule, the algorithm for multiplying integers. So let's get started. Want to make sure you understand that there are different ways that we can write a multiplication problem. Now, the one that you've known since probably third grade when you first learned multiplication was with the x. 2 times 3 equals 6. Now, the other two ways are we can use a dot. It's not a decimal point, it's a dot that's in the middle. This also means 2 times 3. So instead of the x, we use the dot in the middle. Now, you can also use 2, and then you see how the 3 is in parentheses. There's no plus sign in between the 2 and the parentheses or minus sign like we've done before. Before, when we were adding and subtracting, we used the parentheses to kind of put it around a negative number, just to separate it. So, for example, we did 2 minus, for example, negative 3. And that was just to separate this negative sign from the minus sign. This is different. Notice there's nothing in between the 2 and the 3 other than the parentheses. So this also means 2 times 3. All right? We're going to use that as we go forward from here on out because the x, as we get into algebra, actually has a different meaning. And so we show multiplication in a different way to not confuse the two. All right, so going back, way back when you first learned multiplication, probably third grade, and you did a positive number times a positive. For example, 2 times 3. And what was another way you probably learned to say that? 2 groups of 3. You remember doing that? And you probably drew a picture. And so if we use our key up here, and it says to show 2 groups of 3, well, first we have to know what one group of 3 looks like. So here's one group of 3. And this is asking for 2 groups. And what does that equal? Well, of course, it equals 6, right? Here is your 2 groups. And please make sure you are writing this in your notes as well. Now, it's supposed to say groups. And then 2 groups of 3. Now, how do we show it on the number line? You may or may not have used a number line back in elementary school. But just like we did before with adding and subtracting, we start at 0. And to show one group of positive 3, which direction are we going to go? Yep, the positive. So here's one group of positive 3. And then we show a second group of positive 3 by going 3 more, right? And where do we land? At positive 6. So make sure, if you need to, you can pause the video to write in the sentence, show the model with the counters, and with the number line, because the next problem you're going to do on your own. So now I want you to try on your paper 3 times 4. I want you to write the sentence just like we did in the previous example, except now we're doing 3 times 4. Show the models with the counters, what it equals, and also show with the number line. So you're going to pause the video, show this work on your paper. Then when you're finished, press play, and you will have 2 quiz questions that will pop up. So go ahead and press pause. All right, so how did you do? So now we're going to move into what do we do when we multiply with negative integers. So here's our example. Notice we're using the same basic numbers, 2 and 3, but now it's 2 times negative 3. Whereas before when we had 2 times positive 3, it meant 2 groups of 3. What do you think this one means? Right, 2 groups of negative 3. So make sure you are writing this in your notes. 2 groups of negative 3. Now what will that look like with models? Well, here's one group of negative 3, potentially. There we go. And it says to do 2 groups. So here's another group, but my pen's not going to cooperate. So we'll try this. Here's 2 groups. Obviously, it doesn't have to be neat. 2 groups of negative 3. All right, and what does that equal? Negative 6. Good. You see the difference? So here's still our two groups, right? But in this case, it's -3. So it's sort of saying if two people owed $3, how much would they owe altogether? They would owe $6. Now, how are we going to show that with the number line? Before, when it was 2 times +3, we went in the which direction? Positive. So what are we going to do now? Correct. Go in the negative direction. So again, starting at 0, here's one group of -3. And then it said to do two groups. So we go 3 more negatives. And where do we land? At -6. Okay, so again, make sure you have this written down because next problem is your turn. Okay. So again, still a positive times a negative. What does 3 times -4 mean? So you're going to write the sentence on your paper. You're going to show that with the counters, what it equals, and show with a number line. Remember, it's just like the one we did before. So look at your notes. Go ahead, pause the video. When you're done, press play. And again, you'll have 2 quiz questions come up. All right. So we just did a positive times a negative, but what if we switch that around and we have a negative times a positive? Well, if we did the same thing and said, well, -2 groups of 3. Well, -2 groups, that just doesn't make sense, does it? So this is where we're going to use a second meaning for this negative sign. So the negative sign can also mean the opposite of. So think about that. This could be -2 or the opposite of 2, right? Same thing. So let's imply that, let's put that into our sentence. So we want the opposite of what? 2 groups of 3. So write that sentence down. Oops. I want you to write that sentence. The opposite of 2 groups of 3. So notice this part of the phrase, the opposite of, is that negative symbol. The opposite of 2 groups of 3. Well, what's 2 groups of 3? 6, right? 2 times 3 is 6. But what's the opposite of 6? -6. Do you see how this works? So -2 times 3 is -6. Now let's show that with the counters. So again, we want the opposite of 2 groups of 3. Well, what's 2 groups of 3? So here that is, 2 groups of 3. 1 group of 3, 2 groups of 3. But now I want the opposite, right? Our negative symbol, I want the opposite of this. So what would that then become? Negative, right? We change it from positive to negative, so that equals -6. And you may want to put the opposite, okay? And then once you shade it in, you can just kind of get rid of or put the note to yourself. How do we do that on the number line? So again, we want the opposite of what? 2 groups of 3. So how do I show 2 groups of 3? Well, here's 1 group of 3 and 2 groups of 3, right? That was 6, but we wanted the opposite of that, which made it -6. So we wanted the opposite of. All right? So again, if you need to, pause the video to get this written down because the next problem is one you get to try on your own. Again, it'll be a negative times a positive. You ready? Okay, here's yours. So now you have -3 times 4. What does that mean? Write the sentence. Again, you're not going to say -3 groups of 4 because how do you show -3 groups? So you're going to use the other meaning for that symbol, the opposite of. Show with the models, write your answer, and do the number line. Go ahead and press pause, and when you're done, press play and you'll get 2 quiz questions. Go ahead and pause. All right, so last type of problem. Now we're doing if both numbers are negative, negative times a negative. All right? So now we have -2 times -3. Again, how are we going to say this? Because -2 groups doesn't make sense, so we're going to use the opposite of. What's the opposite of 2 groups of -3? So let's look at that. So write your sentence. You want the opposite. Now remember, this phrase right here is what? Your negative symbol. It's another way to say it. The opposite of two groups of -3. Well, what's two groups of -3? -6, right? Remember, here's one group of -3. Here's two groups of -3. And what did that equal? That equaled -6, right? But we want the opposite of that. So what's the opposite of -6? Right, +6. So I'm going to see if I can erase this a little bit. See if this works. All right, so the answer is +6. Except my pen is, again, not working. So how would we show that on the number line? Again, we want the opposite of what? Two groups of -3. Well, let's show two groups of -3 first. Here's one group of -3. Now what we show two groups of -3, go another 3. Right? But then we wanted the what? We wanted the opposite of two groups of -3. What's the opposite of -6? +6, because we wanted the opposite. I'll just abbreviate of. So the answer is a +6. So notice that a negative times a negative gives you a positive. All right, you ready to try one on your own? Yes, you are. Of course you are. So now do yours. -3 times -4. Write the sentence using the opposite of. Do the model with the counters and the number line and make sure you write your answer. So you're going to pause, do the work, press play, and then you'll get your 2 quiz questions. Go ahead and pause. All right, so now what I want you to do is go ahead and look back in the notes you just took. And I want you to see if you see a pattern or a rule. And I'll give you a hint. Look back and see when you multiplied a positive number times a positive, what did you get? Positive or negative? Those are the problems you started learning multiplication with back in 3rd grade. Or when did you get when you did a negative number times another negative number? Either when they're both negative or both positive. What type of answer did you get? Was it positive or negative? Go back and look. Or what happened when you had one of each? You had one positive and one negative. Negative or positive, positive, didn't matter the order. What type of answer did you get when you had one of each? So what I want you to do is pause the video, go back and look in your notes, and then write down what you think the rule might be based on this hint that I gave you. All right, did you get it? So now then, I want you to try it. You have 3 problems here. They're on your notes as well. And you're going to pause the video, and you can use the rule if you want to get the answer. You can draw a number line, you can draw the counters, whatever you would find helpful. It's your choice. So for now, go ahead and press pause, work out these 3 problems. So let's recap. In today's lesson, you learned how to multiply integers using counters and a number line, and also the rule for multiplying integers. And great job. Make sure you have your notes in your binder. Bring your binder to class, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.